Today, we're diving into a phenomenon that, honestly, so many of us know way too well. We're looking at exactly why your brain suddenly decides to run a marathon at 2 in the morning, and, much more importantly, how you can finally learn to find the off switch. So, if you've ever felt just completely drained by your own thoughts, well, you're definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
We've all been there, right? You experience that incredibly frustrating exhaustion where your body is literally begging for sleep, but your mind is just endlessly replaying a totally mundane conversation from earlier in the day. You know the drill. You create 10 different versions of a situation that probably won't even happen, and you start criticizing yourself for things you really should have said differently. It truly feels like having 50 browser tabs open in your head, and every single one is blasting music at maximum volume. And you know what the crazy part is? You know it's irrational. You know it, but you just can't turn it off.
Section 1. The Neuroscience of the Racing Mind. So let's dive into the actual science behind this, because having a mind without an off switch is actually a sign of deep intelligence, even though it's a super heavy psychological burden. Psychologists, they don't just call this overthinking, they call it maladaptive rumination, which is when the mind becomes trapped in these repetitive thought cycles, endlessly revisiting uncertainty or painful memories. Now, people might tell you that you're just too sensitive or you overreact. But studies from places like Yale and the University of Michigan show it isn't caused by weakness at all. Instead, it stems from a highly skilled pattern recognition system in your brain. Your nervous system is basically acting like an advanced, military-grade radar, constantly searching for hidden meaning and just relentlessly scanning the horizon for clues. Looking at this from a neuroscience perspective, your prefrontal cortex, which you can think of as your brain's logical CEO, just becomes completely overloaded. See, normally it's supposed to calm down the amygdala, your panic button alarm system, but during an overthinking episode, your logical CEO gets dragged into these endless internal conversations by what's called the default mode network. And because this network totally hijacks the process, logic completely fails to calm the alarm system. So you're just stuck replaying yesterday while frantically preparing for a tomorrow that hasn't even happened yet.
It's exactly like driving a Ferrari with a massive, incredibly powerful engine. But the catch is, the car is stuck in neutral, and your foot is absolutely glued to the accelerator. The engine is screaming, the fuel is burning so rapidly, but you aren't moving forward a single inch. That's what's happening. You have a brain that never truly goes offline, so it's burning incredible amounts of energy without actually getting you anywhere at all.
Moving on to Section 2, a hidden survival strategy. So, the really crucial question here is why on earth would an intelligent brain intentionally exhaust itself like this? Well, think about this for a second. Did you grow up in an unpredictable environment? Because psychologists have discovered that this habit often begins much earlier in life, usually way back in childhood or adolescence. It actually starts out as a brilliant adaptation to an unpredictable environment, an environment where you had to predict everything, from the shifting moods of the adults around you to harsh criticism for the smallest mistakes just to stay safe. If you could read someone's expression before they even spoke a word, you could protect yourself.
This right here is a massive paradigm shift. Overthinking is an adaptation. It is not a personality defect. Your highly sensitive nervous system simply learned to aggressively scan for danger based on your past environment, which means your brain isn't actually trying to hurt you, and it's certainly not trying to drive you crazy. It's actually just trying to protect you, maybe just a little too aggressively. It's doing exactly what it was perfectly trained to do, just in a world where that level of hypervigilance is no longer required.
Section 3. The illusion of progress and the dopamine loop. Now, to actually escape this cycle, we first need to understand that not all overthinking is exactly the same. There are two very different types. First, you have reflective rumination. This is when you look inward to process your emotions and actually learn from them. It's healthy. It builds emotional intelligence and empathy. But then you have brooding rumination. This is the dangerous type where you get totally trapped inside the problem, endlessly reliving the pain and self-criticism. This is the exact type of overthinking that steals your sleep, fuels social anxiety, and causes complete analysis paralysis.
The incredibly tricky part is how easily we drift from healthy reflection right into toxic brooding. And why does this happen? Well, because thinking feels active, it feels productive, it creates what psychologists call the illusion of mental progress. You really feel like you're actively solving a problem, but unfortunately, you're basically just running on a mental treadmill. You're burning energy, you're definitely feeling the burn, but you are going absolutely nowhere.
Which perfectly leads us to a shared frustration I know we've all felt. Why does advice like, hey, just relax, or just stop thinking about it, feel so incredibly insulting and frustrating?
It's really not because you're stubborn. Forcing yourself to, quote-unquote, just stop rarely works because you are fighting against a biological system that is actually being chemically reinforced by your own body.
Okay, here is probably the most surprising part of the neurochemistry. Your brain gives itself a tiny dopamine reward for overthinking. Now, most people think of dopamine strictly as a feel-good pleasure chemical, right? But your brain also releases dopamine for problem solving. So every single time you mentally argue with someone or vividly prepare for a future conversation in the shower, your brain releases a tiny dopamine reward. It doesn't even care if the problem is totally imaginary. This creates an invisible addiction loop that's strikingly similar to the dopamine hit you get from endlessly doom-scrolling through social media. Your brain is literally rewarding itself for the simple act of overthinking.
All right, section 4, escaping the mental treadmill.
Let's get to the most important part. How do therapists actually help chronic overthinkers escape this loop? Well, spoiler alert, it is not by eliminating thoughts entirely. It's actually by changing your relationship with them. One incredibly powerful technique is called cognitive diffusion. So think of your thoughts like a virtual reality headset. When you're wearing it, that simulated world feels 100% real, right? And it can be terrifying. Cognitive diffusion is exactly like taking off that VR headset and finally realizing your thoughts are just a mental movie playing on a screen. They aren't absolute reality. You're creating distance.
You can start by trying a really subtle shift in your language. Instead of saying something like, "I'm a failure," which totally immerses you in that emotion, you say, "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." By making this one tiny change in your phrasing, you essentially step off the turbulent river and safely onto the shore to just observe your thoughts passing by. This intentional shift pulls brain activity away from your emotional panic centers and directly routes it back to the areas of logic and conscious awareness. But of course, language alone isn't always enough. At its core, overthinking happens because your body still firmly believes danger is absolutely everywhere, and you can't always reason your way out of that primal feeling. You must literally communicate safety to your nervous system through physical, sensory experiences. You have to actively update your body's software, so to speak.
A highly effective way to do this is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. When anxiety starts spiraling, use this physical sensory countdown to ground yourself. You find 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This acts as a massive circuit breaker for your brain. It's not just a cute distraction. It forcefully interrupts the default mode network's endless mental simulations by just completely overloading it with present-moment sensory data.
If you need a faster reset, you really just have to shock the system. You can splash freezing cold water on your face, or go lift something heavy, or just focus intensely on the physical sensation of your feet resting on the floor. By forcefully returning your attention to the present physical world, you send your nervous system a clear, undeniable message that the danger has passed. You're literally telling your body, hey, no one is chasing us. We are totally safe now. Honestly, if you take away absolutely nothing else from this explainer, please remember this. Your mental habit is not a character flaw. It does not mean you are broken or weak in any way. At its deepest level, it's just evidence of a mind with incredible processing power that had to learn to stay alert in a world that once felt unsafe. It's an incredibly powerful engine that really just needs a little redirection and a much kinder driver. And that brings us to a really profound truth. Once you can name the problem, it stops controlling you. Really understanding how your brain works, recognizing those sneaky dopamine loops, and actually naming the maladaptive rumination out loud, that is the very first step toward healing. Your mission here isn't to destroy your sensitive mind. It's to finally become a kinder, gentler guide to your own mind. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider where your own thought patterns usually fall. Do you lean more toward healthy reflection, or do you find yourself getting trapped in that brooding and self-criticism? And tonight, when your mind inevitably starts trying to race, will you let it drag you into the brooding darkness, or will you step safely onto the shore and just watch the river flow by? The choice and the peace that follows is absolutely yours.